Happy Resurrection Day, brothers and sisters. Today, we will be reading from the book of Matthew in chapters 28, and we'll be going through verses 1 through 10. If you have a Bible, please turn to it. If not, there should be a Bible in the seat directly in front of you. And if we can, let's please stand up and give honor to the word of the Lord. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning.
Good morning.
He is risen. He has risen indeed. I'm so happy that you could come and spend your Resurrection Sunday with us this morning. Honestly, I'm glad you would go to any church this morning and spend it this morning in church today, but we are honored and feel privileged that you would come and spend your morning with us here at Lake Springs. I'd like to take a moment to address the families in the room. If you're new with us and looking around, there's a lot of kids in the room right now. And the reason for that is a couple Sundays a year, on Christmas and on Easter, we have decided just to welcome all families in to worship with their families, and we can worship as one big family of families. So whether your family is one person or a bunch of people, we're just excited to worship with you. And I also want to say, if you have kids in the room, first off, if you missed it, there is a table in the back that has some activities and some fun things for them to do. But also, if your kids get a little restless, they move a little bit, make a little bit of noise, I just want to tell you, that's okay. We don't expect everyone to be silent. My kids were not first service, and that's okay. But we don't believe that anyone, no matter how old or how young, that there's anyone that is too inconvenient to worship with. So let the kids make a little bit of noise if they need to make some noise. It's okay. We won't judge you. But I'm curious this morning, what is the greatest piece of news you've ever received? The greatest news you've ever received. Maybe something along the lines of you proposed to your significant other and they said yes. It may be the news that you found out you're having a baby, or that you got the job you were hoping for, or that you passed that final test and you're graduating, or you got into the school you were hoping to get into. Everyone has something that they deem is the greatest news that they've ever received. For me, the two biggest pieces of news, the two greatest pieces of news I've ever received was first on a cold Michigan November evening in 2009, when after a couple hour-long date of nervous procrastination, not asking my then girlfriend at the time to marry me, even though she knew that's what I was doing that night. But I was nervous. I didn't know what she would say. I knew what she would say, but I was nervous for some reason, and I wasn't doing it. And then we were sitting at the end of the night on a bench on a bridge over this pond as it got dark and as the lights turned off, and we were sitting there, and it was cold. And after a little while of us sitting there, she turns to me and she says, "Do you want to go home?" And I said, "No, wait, hang on." And I said, "No, wait, I got something to ask." And I got down on one knee and I said, "Will you marry me?" And she said, "Yes." It was the greatest piece of news I've ever received. And then almost exactly 10 years later, in 2019, we were driving home from Greenville, South Carolina, back up here to the Raleigh area. And my wife gets a phone call, and she's talking on the phone for 45 minutes and crying and talking. I don't know what's going on. And she hangs up and she looks at me and says, "There's someone who wants us to adopt their baby." It was the two greatest pieces of news I've ever received. But I'm curious what your greatest news is. And like both of those, however, all great news requires some sort of life change. All pieces of great news require some sort of life change. If you get the news, you propose, and you get the news, "Yes, I'll marry you," guess what? things are about to change. You can't go on living like a single person anymore as you're getting engaged and planning to be married. If you found out you got the job that you were hoping to get, guess what? Things are about to change. Life is about to look different. The place you go for work every day, the things you do every day are about to change. You find out you're having a baby. It's great news, but things are about to change. You think you're going to sleep the same way you did before. Brother, you're not. It's going to be tough, but it's great news, but life is about to change. The reality is that all great news disrupts our life. Great news will disrupt your life. And no matter what news you've gotten before, no matter what great news you've gotten, no great news compares with the great news that was shared on that very first Easter morning. That very first Easter morning, as the angels came and spoke with the women and shared the great news of Jesus' resurrection, and then as they were commissioned as the first evangelists of the resurrection to go and share that news with the disciples, and as they went and they shared this great news with the disciples, and their response was not, "He is risen indeed," was it not? But they went and they shared, and this great news came, and it didn't just disrupt their lives, it disrupted the entire world. And if you choose to accept the resurrection, if you choose to accept the reality of the resurrection, it will disrupt your life as well. Easter Sunday because somebody convinced you to come. And that's okay. If that's you, if you're here just because someone told you you need to come and you didn't want to, but you came anyways, guess what? I'm so glad you're here. That's great news that you're here. If you came because you were promised lunch afterwards or because you're just trying to keep the peace in your house, I am glad that you're here. Or if you came because you genuinely want to worship Jesus this morning, regardless of why you're here, I am glad you're here. But my goal today is not to convince you of the resurrection. My goal today is not to convince you of the reality of the resurrection. My goal is to show you that if you accept the resurrection, it will turn your world upside down. If you acknowledge the resurrection is true, it will change everything about your life. This Easter Sunday, as we look at the story of the resurrection of Jesus, we're also going to be looking at the last section of Jesus' teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. Here at Lake Springs, we've been going through the Sermon on the Mount ever since January, and looking at this as a way to say, how do we want to live our lives as followers of Jesus? And we want to align ourselves with the Jesus way of living. And as it concludes today with Jesus' final teaching in the Sermon on the Mount, that, alongside with Easter, is going to present us with a choice to make. We're going to be presented with a choice to make, to decide if we're going to let the good news of the resurrection turn our lives upside down, or if we are going to continue living the same way that we were before. So this morning, as we begin, we're going to start in Matthew chapter 7. If you have a Bible, you are welcome to open it up with us. There are blue Bibles underneath the seats in front of you. If you're new with us, typically on Sundays, we don't put our primary scripture text up on the screen. We love it when you open a physical Bible, turn there, and see that what we are saying is the actual words of Scripture, not something that we made up. However, today I also recognize that some of you are playing a little bit of defense with kids around you, and it might be hard to juggle a Bible too. So for today, all of our Scripture text will be on the screen. But today we are concluding this study through the Sermon on the Mount, and in this passage we're going to see a list of almost like warnings by looking at a list of opposites. And the first opposite that Jesus presents us with is he's looking at two different paths that we can take. So we're going to start in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 13. These are Jesus' words. And he says this, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." You see, this is the choice that Easter presents us with. That there's two paths to take. There's the Jesus way, aligning ourselves with the resurrection and with Jesus, or we can go the other way. One leads to life and one leads to destruction. And unfortunately, there is no third option. We can't look at this and say, I'm just going to make my own path. I'm going to do life my own way because I'm sorry, but doing things our own way is the path that leads to destruction. There is no third option. There's following Jesus and leading to life, or there is not following him and leading to death. See, this is an invitation, but it's also a warning. See, remember, as Jesus is teaching here, he's teaching in the first century to a primarily Jewish audience, and most first century Jewish people believed that they were saved by virtue of just being a descendant of Abraham. All right, they believed that they were inherently, because of who they are and where they were, that they were saved, but Jesus is challenging this belief. He is challenging their assumption of salvation. And let me tell you, this can be true for us today as well. Depending on where you live, depending on what area you are in, there are parts in there are areas that it may be culturally accepted or even culturally advantageous for you to claim to be a Christian. Now, that's certainly not the case in the entire world or the entire country, even the entire state, but there are pockets, especially in the South, that it may be beneficial to you socially to claim Christianity. Cultural Christianity runs rampant, especially in the South, and it can be a danger to us to claim Christianity just by virtue of where we are or based on our upbringing. See, Jesus says that few find the path to life, and as he says this, he's not talking about atheists. He's not talking about those who want nothing to do with him. He's not talking about those who choose to not be associated with him. He's talking about those that claim to be saved by virtue of who they are and where they are, and many people go down this road, but it leads to destruction. Many people go down this road because it's easy to claim, it's easy to say, I am saved by virtue of how I grew up or where I am or the people I associate with. That's the easy way. If I don't have to change my life and I'm that way because of who I am or where I am, that's the easy path to go down. But the difficult path to go down is the one that says, Jesus, I want to change my life and align my life with your teaching. The narrow path is the one that leads to life. And we can trust that the narrow path leads to life because of the resurrection. We can trust that because of what happens in a handful of chapters. Because Jesus' death and resurrection, we don't base our lives on him just because we're told to, but we base our lives on him because of his death and his resurrection. And because of that, we can walk the narrow path knowing that it doesn't lead to a dead end, knowing that it leads to life. And so our goal today is not to hear an inspiring story. If you came to church today and you're not a typical churchgoer, you came because it's Easter, I am very glad you're here. But our goal today is not just to hear a feel-good story. Our goal today is to hear the story about Easter and to realize that Easter needs to lead to transformation. Easter cannot just be a special Sunday once a year. Easter cannot just be a story that we read, but Easter should shape our entire lives. Every Sunday, every day, every decision we make should be based on the reality of the resurrection. See, it's not enough to just claim to follow the narrow path, to just claim Christianity. And this is what Jesus is getting at. He goes on to warn against claiming to follow this path even when we're not. Jesus then talks about these two different, another couple opposites. He talks about two different types of teachers. He talks about two different types of disciples, two different types of Jesus followers. He tells us the difference between those that follow Jesus and have been transformed into his likeness versus those that just follow Jesus in name and appearance only. See, Easter Sunday is an invitation for us to look inward. It's an invitation to self-examination. The practice that Mark, our newest elder, walked us through just a few weeks back, it's an invitation for us to look inward to determine what is really guiding my life. What is guiding my life? What have I based my life on? And Jesus then closes the Sermon on the Mount with a challenge. The whole sermon comes down to this. It's his longest recorded sermon. It's the most preached about, the most written about sermon in all of human history. It all comes down to this final statement. It all comes down to this final statement in verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like the foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. See, we are all being formed by something. We have all found our identity in something. We have all built the foundation of our lives on something. Your foundation you've built maybe on the money or the wealth you've accumulated, maybe on your successes, your experiences, your family structure, your job status, anything like that. You may have built your foundation on these things, and these things are not inherently bad things. We often build the foundation of our lives on things that are actually good things, but we're not meant to sustain us. We're not meant to help us weather the toughest of storms. We're not meant to sustain us for an eternity. There's only one foundation that we can build our life on. Only one foundation that will last for an eternity, and that is the foundation of Jesus. To build your life on his words, on his teachings, to build your life on being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and doing what Jesus did. And especially especially today on Easter. This isn't some hollow or empty challenge. This isn't something we just say. We don't blindly follow someone, but we build our lives on Jesus because of what he accomplished on Easter. We build our lives on Jesus because of the resurrection. See, we talked about this a couple days ago. We gathered on Good Friday to recognize Jesus' death and to mourn his death, but also to be expectant of what would follow. See, on Friday, what we celebrate on Friday is Jesus' death. What we recognize is Jesus' death, that he was beaten, he was abused, he was ridiculed, he was placed upon the cross. He was placed up there not just to die, but to die in the most painful and humiliating way possible, outside of the city gates, on a hill for all to see, as a spectacle for everyone to see. And after hanging on the cross, he dies. He dies a literal, physical death. And he's placed in a tomb, and guards are placed in front of the tomb. And then humanity waits. The world waited. The Messiah that had come to save humanity had been defeated, was in the grave, and for many it seemed like the story was over. But we know that the story didn't end there, don't we? As we continue reading, as we look into Matthew 28, as we look again to what Yuri read for us just a little bit ago, we see what happens next. We see that Jesus was killed, he was buried, guards were placed at his tomb, and then we look back in Matthew 28 to see the rest of the story. It says, after the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, he is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go and quickly tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Then suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." See, we don't build our lives on Jesus because he was a good teacher. We don't build our lives on Jesus because he was a good person, because he was a moral person. We build our lives on Jesus because he conquered sin and death. And he didn't just conquer sin and death, he did so for you. He did so that you could experience life. Jesus' resurrection proves that his words are worth building your life on. The resurrection proves what we read at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, that his words are worth building the foundation of your life on. See, Jesus came and died this physical, real death so that you could experience life with him. He died as the sacrifice of sins for all of mankind so that we could be reconciled to the Father and experience new life. See, Jesus died because though mankind had continually turned their back on him, all the way back in the Garden of Eden and all throughout eternity, mankind has continued to turn away from him, to turn our backs on him, to go our own way. But God wouldn't leave us in the state of abandoning him, but he sent his son on the biggest rescue mission of all eternity, the biggest rescue mission of humanity. They came to rescue us, to reach out his hand so we could be reconciled to the Father. See, Jesus' death and resurrection show that he is worth rooting your life in. He is worth placing your foundation in. He is worth following with every fiber of your being. But Jesus' death cannot be a story that we just read on Easter. It can't be something that we just read. Maybe you have a tradition of reading it around the breakfast table or reading it this afternoon and around dinner. It cannot be a tradition that we just read on Easter and then go about our day, but it demands some sort of response from us. If we truly believe what we're reading, it demands some sort of response from us. See, we build our lives on Jesus not by just accumulating more knowledge about him. It's good to gather knowledge. It's good to read about Jesus. It's good to read the Bible, and it's good to read things about the Bible. It's good to read history. It's good to read things about the things that happen in the Bible. But all of that information that we gather should serve the purpose of further obedience to Jesus. That it's good to learn, but our foundation cannot be built on more information. Our foundation is built through obedience to Jesus, not just more information about him. Knowledge is great, but we can't wait until we have all the information. I know everything, and then I'll build my life on Jesus. Our foundation is built on following Jesus, on following his word through obedience not just on gathering more information. So as we read the story of Easter this morning, we read the death and the resurrection of Jesus, we're faced with a question. And the question is, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? Are we going to go home, go to lunch, go have dinner, and continue on our week and our lives as if nothing happened, or are we going to make some sort of change? What are we going to do with Easter? See, I want you to think about it this way. There's something unique that happens every 4 years in the world that the entire world seems to focus on every 4 years, but doesn't seem to care about any other time. What does the world focus on? Everywhere, every country focus on every 4 years. What does everyone focus on? No, not the World Cup. Good guess. I didn't even know that was every 4 years. People in first service, come on. Every 4 years, there seems to be a renewed interest in the sport of curling. Curling. Y'all know what curling is? It's the Winter Olympic sport that, it has the guys like brooming the ice and sweeping the ice, and it looks ridiculous. Does it not? I mean, and no shame if there's professional curlers in the room, but it looks like a really silly sport. Apparently, it's much more difficult and strategic than it looks. In fact, as I was reading, I saw that curling is often referred to as chess on ice, which seems a little dramatic to me, but I don't know. But what happens in curling, the most ridiculous group of people, the most ridiculous looking players in curling are the sweepers. Right? Those with the sweepers. What they do is they have these broom-looking things. They have these mops or these brooms that look an awful lot like this. Right? This is not one. This is a broom that was given to us because it's really good at sweeping up dog hair, and we have dogs with long hair. But it looks kind of like this. And what they do as they're playing their part in curling, whatever, they're just sweeping. And they just go to town sweeping. So what happens is at the top of the lane, there is someone with the coolest name of any position in sports. You have the stone thrower. All right, so the stone thrower, they're at the top of the lane, and they glide up, and they get down in like a marriage proposal stance, and they just glide up, and they release this 40-pound chunk of granite onto the ice. All right, they just release it onto the ice, and it goes down the lane, and as it goes down the lane, then you have the sweepers who come, and they just start sweeping. They just start going nuts. Like, they're just sweeping, they're going crazy, and the whole time, the stone thrower is yelling things out to them. He's yelling instruction, and it's especially exciting if you're watching a team whose language you don't understand, because they're just going nuts, and you don't know what's happening. But they're yelling things, they're yelling codes, they're yelling things about to make it go, sweep to make it faster, sweep to make it spin more, to make it hit the other person's stone, to make it hit the target. And what happens is, for those moments, the sweepers have to be completely reliant on the stone thrower. The reason for that is the stone thrower knows exactly how much effort they put into releasing the stone. They know exactly how much spin is on it. They can see the whole lane. They can see where it's going, where it needs to go. They have a perspective that the sweepers don't have. So the sweepers, as they're going, they have to be fully reliant on the stone throwers. They've got to be going to town, and they got to be listening to the stone thrower. And this is often how we can be when we come out of a Sunday like Easter. When we come out of a Sunday like Easter, we can be going and we can be fully just on fire for Jesus. You can be like, Jesus, I'm going to listen to everything you say, and I'm going to live my life based on you, and I'm just sweeping for Jesus. Like, I'm just going to town. I'm just sweeping for Jesus, and I'm going to go anywhere he wants me to go. And that can feel really good for Sunday. And then we get to Monday and Tuesday, and work goes on, and I'm sweeping, and I'm trying to do the things that I'm supposed to do, but I realize that Jesus may be telling me to do something that makes me a little uncomfortable. Then I'm starting to sweep, but Jesus, you seem to be telling me to do something or pointing me in a direction that I'm not sure that makes me so comfortable. So maybe I'll back off my sweeping a little bit. Maybe I'll slow down. Maybe you're telling me to sweep this way, but instead of sweeping this way, I'm going to sweep this way. Excuse me, y'all. Maybe I just want to sweep through here and sweep my own direction and go a way that is different than where Jesus is telling me to go. See, but the reality is the only way to live a life that is the life that God intended for us, the life that we've been reading about all throughout the Sermon on the Mount, this flourishing life that God intended for us, is to stay rooted in the instruction of the stone thrower. To stay rooted in the instruction of Jesus, the one who sees the whole picture, the one who can see the destination of where we want to go and can see that that is the path that leads to destruction. That is the only way to a life that God intended for us. See, our lives are all being formed by something. Our lives are all being formed by something. Your life may be being formed. It's being formed by things like the music you listen to, the books you read, the shows you watch, the company you surround yourself with. Every input we have is forming us into a certain type of person. We have all found our identity in something. We have all built our lives on something. And it can be tempting in a message like this to think about where you've been before today. To think about where you've been and say, I've gone my own way so many times. I've built my life on so many different things. So it's too late for me. I've tried it too many ways and it's not working for me. But the question for us isn't what happened before today. The question for us is, what do I want to build my life on going forward? What do I want to build my life on starting today, starting right now, moving forward? Jesus is inviting you to build your life on a life transformed by him, to experience his love, his grace, his forgiveness, and to go on living a life that is shaped by Jesus. So this Easter, I want to extend an invitation to you. The invitation is simple. It is simply to accept or reject Jesus. And unfortunately, there is no third option. To not accept is to reject. This does not mean that there's no room for doubt, that there's no room for questions, and there's no room for wrestling. But at the end of the day, we have to make a choice, and it is either accept or reject Jesus. See, will you allow the great news of the resurrection to disrupt your life today? Will you allow the resurrection to turn your life completely upside down, change the path that you were on before, and go on down the narrow path, living a life that is rooted in the instruction of Jesus? See, God sent Jesus as this outstretched hand, and it is up to us to decide if we are going to grab that hand or not. It is up to us to decide if we are going to accept that hand or not. And if it's an invitation to stop trying to just live life on your own, to go your own way. And so I want to ask you something. I want to invite you to do something. In a few moments, I'm going to pray, and I want to invite you to pray with me. And whether you have maybe accepted Jesus in the past and have gone on, walked away from that, gone on living your own way, and you're sitting here today saying, I want to recommit. I want to commit my life to Jesus today. My own way has not been working. I want to go the Jesus way today. Or whether you're sitting here saying, I've never made that commitment before. I've never made that decision before. Either way, I want to invite you to pray with me. I want to invite you to turn away from your own way of doing things, turn away from the path that leads to destruction, and turn towards the path that leads to life, the Jesus way of living. So I'd love to invite you just to pray with me this morning, if you would bow your heads. Jesus, I acknowledge that I have tried to go in my own way so many times. I have tried to live my own way. I have tried to root my life in anything other than you. I have found my identity in everything that I accomplish, everything I do. I have found my identity in everything except for you. And Jesus, as you know, that has not worked. But I'm ready to change today. I'm ready for you to disrupt my life. I'm ready for my world to be turned upside down. I'm ready to go down the narrow path that leads to life instead of my own path that leads to destruction. Jesus, I acknowledge that you came, that you lived as a physical person, that you died a literal death, and that you rose again. And you did all of this so that I could experience forgiveness and I could experience new life in you. And Jesus, I want to live that new life. I want to turn away from my own way of doing things and turn towards you. Oh, but Jesus, I do not have the strength to do that on my own. Empower me. Give me the strength to live a life that is rooted in your instruction. And Jesus, we thank you. We thank you for the invitation you give to live in your family, to live a life with you. Be with us today. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Amen. See, if that is something that you did pray with me, if that's something that you've either recommitted, decided today I want to make a change and I want to recommit my life to Jesus, or I've never even made that decision before and today I want to start living my life for Jesus, either way, if that is you, I'd love to walk this journey with you. I would love to do this with you. In fact, you'll see in the seat backs around you, you'll see Connect cards. I would love for you to fill one of those out and indicate that you have decided to follow Jesus. And if so, I would love to get with you. I would love to talk with you and walk this journey with you. There are many people here at Lake Springs who would love to walk this journey with you because the reality is none of us were meant to walk this journey with Jesus alone. None of us were meant to try and forge this path on our own. We are meant to do this in community. So I would love to help as we get out of Sunday, as we get into tomorrow and the rest of our week and our month, as life gets hard, as the Jesus way, the Jesus path gets difficult for us. I would love to walk that path along with you. So please, if you're able, I would love for you to fill out one of those cards or just come and talk to me after service, and I would love to walk this Jesus path alongside with you.